So this week we're going to be talking about the very latest in our series of Hunterian poem books, which launched just last night, actually. Hunter's Voices, which has been published by Stewed Rhubarb Press. All three books in the series have been very wonderfully edited by poet and Professor Alan Riach, who will be leading our talk today. And we'll be joined by poets Gerrie Fellows and Sanderson, whose writing has been featured in this series. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. I hope you enjoyed today's talk. I hope you enjoy the poems that you're about to hear. And I'll hand over to Alan now to lead the talk.
Okay, I've just unmuted myself. Thank you. So I think I can be heard. So hello, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Eleni, and the Hunterian for organising this. We're in person on campus at the Hunterian Art Gallery yesterday evening, and that was one experience, wonderful venue to be launching the book in. This is the online launch, effectively. And we haven't, because the book itself actually arrived with the publisher yesterday evening. I just wanted to put this in front of the screen so you can get a sense of what the actual cover looks like. It matches the editions of the Hunterian Poems books which precede it, partly in its design, but also just to let you know that this image here is based on the structure of the original Hunterian Museum, which was in the West End, in the East End of Glasgow before it moved to where the university is now here in the West End. So there's a kind of what you might call an official authority to the building, to the design, to the notion of it being a museum in which things are protected, but things are also cut off and kept safe and secure, not to be intruded upon by vandalism. And we kind of are sensitive to this in this anthology particularly. The first one was a kind of more conventional in its approach. It was an ekphrastic book, ekphrastic arts, poems in relation to the paintings, selection of paintings in the Hunterian Art Gallery. When that was over and successful, we thought we might do a second volume of poems in response to the objects in the museum, the Hunterian Museum, which is a much stranger book because it opened up all kinds of inquiries about educational priorities, the priorities of how the objects have been used in the history of medicine, in the history of engineering, in the history of collecting. And then we thought finally we might actually do the third volume, and this is it, where we bring these ideas together, and underlying all the poems that are there is a question about the priorities of collecting, and you might say appropriation, or you might even say theft, and colonialism, colonial theft of indigenous cultures, indigenous peoples. All of these questions are there, but at the same time, it's a showcase of the treasures of the Hunterian, which are educationally inclined, they're open to educational priorities, and they're also open to aesthetic priorities in terms of the arts, the paintings and so on, most clearly. I'm not going to say too much at this moment about that background. A lot of it's detailed in the introduction to the book, and you can purchase copies of the book. And as one of the poets said last night, they're wonderful books to give away as presents with whatever occasions might arise in the foreseeable where you might want to give people presents. So please just think of this as a taster, as a tantalizer. One of the questions that keeps coming up is perspective. From where are you looking, and how are the works that you're looking back at you? So I'm going to top and tail this half hour with a poem at the beginning and at the end. Then I'm going to pass on to Gerrie Fellows and Stewart Sanderson then, who have very, very different kinds of poem to read as part of our presentation to you today. And we'll pick that up. I'll come back towards the end and pick that up and think if we can open that up then to questions that you might have yourselves, if any questions or comments arise, what you've been watching, what you've been witnessing here. So I'll start off with the poem that goes with this painting. This painting is called Wet Haystack. It's by an artist called John Cunningham, who happened to be my uncle. He taught at the Glasgow School of Art. I knew this painting from when I was 6 or 7 years old when he painted it in the 60s. And I remembered it vividly all through that period since then. And it was only when I came back to work at Glasgow University after 14 years working in New Zealand that I was going over into the principal's lodging at the university for a dinner, and there it was in the foyer of the principal's lodging, and I sort of rediscovered it. Then a serendipity, kind of finding things that you knew about, it was somewhere lodged in your mind. And then I thought about the painting itself and what perspective you're looking at. You're looking at it from, in one sense, very clearly, here you are, and that's where you're looking. But on the other hand, if you look at it a certain way, the trees seem to be coming towards you, or they seem to be inviting you in. Or what if you were behind the trees up in that patch of blue sky, looking back down? What if you were sitting on a cloud, looking back down towards the viewer? And all of this sort of just sheer speculation came into the poem, along with the location where I found the painting again, location in time, the location on the clock. Here's the poem. This bit of the forest has haunted my dreams for a long time. 1963 or 4, and I would be 6 or 7, seeing it then for the first time. Only once. You see things for the first time. Only once. After that, repeats, returns the little clutch of company of trees in the middle distance, approaching or retreating, beckoning you, come forward, come into our shelter. The trees. Negotiate wet haystacks, hard grass, haystacks high, and then be among us, a part of the forest. But hold back, take a full view, bright coloured flowers in the foreground, blue skies, warm brightness, high space far above. The trees come no closer, nor do they retreat. But their presence looms permanent there, and that fixture, security, is right. It means that your mind can walk through them, or pause, before, or look down from the clouds to imagine them there, or just watch them from this, the appropriate distance. So the poem is a kind of speculation on what you're looking at and where you're looking from, and what it is that what you're looking at looks, how it is that what you're looking at looks back at you. And that's a kind of inquiry that runs through, I think, the whole book. And I'm going to pass on immediately to Gerrie Fellows, who has 2 poems to talk of, one from an exhibition which involved African art, and one from the great collection of the Hunterian of Roman artifacts. Gerrie, do you take it?
So I've been lucky enough actually to be involved in all 3 of these lovely anthologies, and it's been I suppose my relationship with the Hunterian and its collections developed over that time, and to the extent where I actually wrote in between anthologies 2 and 3, I actually wrote my own chapbook of poems based on the objects in the museum. And I remember slightly struggling to finish that, looking for a focus. And in some ways, I feel that this poem is perhaps it. You know, I've done a lot of thinking about the Hunterian and what's in it and what it means. So this was written as a very immediate response to an exhibition that was on in the Hunterian Art Gallery earlier this year, the Trembling Museum, and it was a very exciting exhibition in which some of the Hunterian Museum's African objects emerged, not only from storage, but from ethnography. And so the poems, it's a kind of walkthrough. There are a lot of objects in it, including a number of the Thornwood figures, one of which is the image here. Museum, mirror written. Boxes wrapped for quarantine, 6.7 kilograms. West Africa Ethno 720. And in reverse, boxed, mirror written. Kenya, East Africa Ethno 473. South Africa, 5.8 kilograms. In each box, what might have been wrapped for quarantine. Do not open from 1 year of the above date. Memeldrum. unknown Fanti artist, Southern Ghana, silent, yet the air in the gallery trembles, like the shimmer of a thread on a robe, an embroidered pattern on a Baban Riga, Hausa needlework crossed with the desert's traces, or the coiled lace of cassava root paste on a Dira Aleko, a cloth of root, soil, place, indigo dyed. Its colour is of ocean, the resist and erasure, the pale line like the line of a worm in the wood of a slave ship, an erasure and a continuity, boxed, quarantined, carried like the thread of sound from Africa into the Delta blues. Place might be the strike of a mattock on red earth, a ground of palm nuts rolled on wood, a shaping from memories and divination and the present tense. A boy turns a handstand, a woman dances, a family on a moped spin dust in their wheels. Are they people in a landscape, these thornwood figures? The tree they are made from is timber, medicine, meetings and talk in its shade, cyber pentandra, holed by insect, gnarled by fungi, a dwelling in place or in sound, in speech, in what is carried in the arms, on the back, in the mouth, in memory, unwrapped, masks and living faces, in the black and white of the film, in the dark and light of the gallery. So the second poem, as Alan has said, is about objects we've probably been more familiar with in visiting the Hunterian because they've always been on display, I think. So Roman objects which were found in the vicinity of Bar Hill Fort on the Antonine Wall, which is a place I'm quite familiar with. And I suppose the poem, this is also a poem which in a different way sort of moves out of the museum into the landscape, into place, the place which these objects were part of, although the people who made them were probably strangers to us, but they're part of our history. Inscriptions. Lettered sandstone, patterned to a broken edge, Deo Marti Camulo, a prayer inscribed in a second language, remnant, among cracked open fragments come to sight in quarried earth. From a courtyard well, coins and finger rings, Rome's stamp, Hadrianus Augustus, given up to a place with its own weather, filled as the well itself with ghosts named and nameless, bones, human, phalanges, northwest corner of the Praetentura, refuse pit 1. The tombstone of a soldier, inscribed to the spirits of the departed, Flavius Lucianus. The tombstone of a soldier, eroded, without inscription, forgotten, guessed at, come to light, among hazel twigs and local earth, all that continues, paved over mavericks, the Laverock sings over. I'll leave it there with the place.
I love that ending, the Laverock singing over the lark. That's
Yes.
the Laverock is the Scots word for the lark.
Yes.
Lark Hall in Lanarkshire, the place called Lark Hall, or Lark Hall, it used to be called Laverock Hall.
Ah.
The lark that sings over all of these. Or then the Vaughan Williams, just the famous The Lark Ascending is one of the most loveliest pieces of music. That sense of it being up there. As I was saying in my point, that sense of looking down from the sky.
Yes. Yes.
Anyway, enough. Stewart, please, would you come in?
Yeah, thank you, Alan. I was just thinking there's a famous troubadour song, Can Vela Lesita Mover, which I think is also about the lark. And obviously, wasn't Rico the Laverock took that nicked. only meteorites in the Lavery, so to that next. So this is a bit of iron number 1, the initial bit of iron in the Hunterian Collection. It's part of the amazing Pallas meteorite discovered in Siberia in the 18th century, I believe. This was a really, really wonderful, really exciting commission to get from Alan, and I'm really, really grateful for it, because normally I don't seem to be very good at responding to prompts and commissions, but for some reason I really enjoyed responding to Hunterian, perhaps because it's a collection that I've got so much out of over the years. This one is, I'm going to do two things really. This one isn't a conventional poem. It's an analog poetry generator from which one can, if one chooses, generate a not infinite but extremely large number of poems. So the idea, I guess, being to produce something in poetic form that mirrors the contingencies and the chances that have led this fragment of meteorite to Siberia, through the halls of Enlightenment science to Hunter, to the museum where it is still today, and something like that in poetic form which mirrors that chance. So there are other poems in poetic history that do similar things, but basically there are 9 sections of 9 lines each, mirroring the molecular structure of iron. Each option of a line has 26 letters. And what I'd like to do, if that's all right, is there are various ways that you can make this work. You can roll dice, you can find other random ways of choosing your options, but each of these segments gives you an option for a line. So I'd like to maybe take you through that once on my own, and then while I'm doing that, let's see if this works. If people would like to put a number between 1 and 9 in the chat, and if we can get 9 of those numbers, I'll just see if I can, after I've read an iteration of it myself, I'll try and follow that through the poem, and we'll create a poem of our own today, if that's all right. So I'll start and just read my way through it initially. Debris from a forgotten battle, dwelling here in our rainy city. It has spoken to the snow leopards, but it will not reveal this to us. We meet the future in its figure, for here too there is dialectic. Before we consider theodicies, in the bleats of a sheep we learn. This is all we can ever aspire to. Okay, this might be a wee bit clunky. I think we might. So we're going to need, how many numbers do we have? We're going to need a few more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Four more numbers, please, folks. Brilliant. I think that's us. I'll try and make this work. This may look a bit weird as I sort of cycle between the chat and the other things, but it's all about contingency, so I hope you'll bear with me. And there is a normal poem coming up shortly, so I can do those as well sometimes. Right. Tiniest sliver of the infinite, discovered by a mining foreman. It has strange truths, bets, and in some ways is not unlike us. Today, we must look again at this, the reason why it has descended. Even if time eats this away also. At least one wild prophet rants. It wants to be made into bullets. Oh, thank you, that was fun. And the fun thing about that is that it's a poem that we all own. It doesn't belong to me. It's a protest that anyone can have fun with, hopefully. So I'll maybe go on to the more conventional poem, if that's all right, quickly. So
before, just can I?
Sorry.
Yeah, just is that? Am I right in thinking that might be the oldest object in the Hunterian?
Oh, I don't know.
Maybe
Oh,
not.
yeah, probably. I mean, yeah, I guess.
I'm not the wisest source, but it could be.
It could be. It could be an iron meteorite of such a nature. I don't know. Just a thought. Anyway, sorry. On you go. That was great.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't think about that because obviously it spent a lot of time drifting through the solar reaches before it gets to us. As says Harpocrates, and it's pretty quiet out there in deep space. And Harpocrates is the classical, Hellenistic, perhaps, I don't really know, classical, let's say, god of silence, quite popular in Egypt, so I believe, where this blue files figure comes from. This poem is about the god of silence. It's spoken in the voice of this blue files figure. Harpocrates. I am what's waiting in between your words, the absence of an answer to your prayer, as well as that which gnaws at all your music. Choose the closing chords of each performance. And when the applause has petered out, believe me, I am there. In my long life, I've eaten languages, spitting the date stones of Sumerian, Etruscans' olive pips. And someday I will do the same with this tongue you believe yours, even as it slips into my dark maw. Hold it while you can. Secrets I savor like a fine old wine, bottled before phylloxera swept through the vineyards of the world. And I adore the undiscovered clue, the mystery unsolved, the lie, the line a poet forgets, the insult never hurled. After your truth commissions have wound up, and much redacted, they had to be, released their last reports, which will be found to have betrayed the hope with which they started. It may prove a sort of comfort being left alone with me. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you, both of you. That's tremendous. And okay, I'm gonna move on and read the last poem in our sequence of presentations today, and then maybe open it up to see if there are any questions or comments that anybody would like to make. This is the last poem in the book, and going from Hippocrates and silence and antiquity and the ancient past and the prehistoric past and the pre-prehistoric past to a notion of the future. And this is the last poem based on in response to a painting by Alexander Moffat and the Gaelic Commission, the Gaelic operation in Glasgow. The painting is called the Compass of Hope, but the actual poem is called The Water of Hope. And you'll see reference in the poem to the circularity of the globe, the global nature of the earth, the cube that the teacher is sitting on, the music of the harp and the fiddle. Anyway, so the idea of the children and the Gaelic language, of what the future might be. The water of hope. When clear water runs from the well in the mountain, marked by the Celtic design, the patchwork quilt of languages that make the earth a habitable globe, their colours of such designations, their parts of the planet define, will welcome its music and movement, a channel of tunes in a whole world of learning. When the children play fiddle and clarsach and sing to the teacher's direction, when the colours are such as enhance bright minds and the deepest reflection, the learning begins. What it brings us, the water, the colours, the shapes and the sounds, is a play to be in, to be part of, but also to witness and watch. The curves, the circle, the cube, the straight line and the crooked, sign languages and Glasgow, home of such collections, of good hopes, these prospects, aspirations, independence. That's my poem. That's my final contribution to the book. And we can go back to the trees if you like, but the sense of it all is that the whole collection brings together the artifacts, the objects from the museum. As Gerrie's first poem suggests, it inquires into what the museum is, the cataloguing, the idea that it comes from. The whole collection comes from that era of enlightenment the codification and the categorization of knowledge, the ultimate, I was going to say something the other day, the ultimate digitization of libraries is wrong. Fundamentally, somewhere, somehow, there's something wrong about this, because libraries and museums are serendipity, if they are anything. And librarians and curators are among the most important essential workers in the world. But we are nothing without them. And the objects that are there and the paintings that are there are what we're exploring from more than one perspective book. But I'll stop there. I think we're coming towards the end of our half hour, but if there are questions or comments that anybody would like to make, we would be happy to address them. Eleni, I don't know if you've got any...
Yeah, if anyone's got any questions, yeah, please do pop them in the chat. That was really wonderful. It's great to hear everyone's writing. I mean, I'm still trying to wrap my head around, Stewart, like the right. I mean, coming up with a generative poem that seems to flow in whatever format it's read in. That's probably a lot of work that takes to do.
Well, I should say that when I asked Stewart to contribute, when I got this message with an attachment by email, I was sitting in an airport somewhere, I think in Paris, trying to get to Brittany, and we were delayed, and this email came through. And literally, it almost felt as if the smoke was coming out of the iPad. I mean, it was, what on earth have I done inviting Stewart Sanderson to contribute a poem to this book? What has he done in delivering this page upon page of, and the curiosity is that it works in the way that it does. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We have got a question in the chat from Kevin, which says, did you each choose the objects yourself, or were they suggested to you by the museum? And if you chose yourself, how did you start with presumably thousands of options?
Well, I invited the poets to respond in such a way and to choose for themselves whichever objects or paintings they'd like to respond to. But I did itemize, and it's in the introduction to the book, a number of themes and ideas that could underlie any poem that might come. So in a way, we're talking about the Hunterian Collection as a resource for research. So I think also to note this is that the work, the art of writing the poem, is also a form of actual research, of actual inquiry, intellectual inquiry into what's going on here. So the poets were open to choose the objects, but I was trying just gently to prompt inquiries of various kinds, as you'll see when you read the introduction. But I'll ask Gerrie and then maybe Stewart just to respond briefly to how or why the particular choices were made.
I think just starting perhaps with the simplest one of those, which would be the Roman objects. I think that came out of my, I'd have to go back to an earlier anthology where I wrote a long poem of inquiry about Hunter and 18th century collecting. And I then felt that I wanted to go and write about lots of different objects, which other people had done for that anthology. So in a way, I was sort of working my way through various, I wrote about scientific objects. I wrote about, I don't think insects got into it in the end. I wrote birds' nests, and quite, why does a particular thing catch your imagination? That's a bit hard to know. I think with the other, with the poem about the exhibition, that of course, like the poem I'd written about Hunter earlier on, is a sort of multi-object poem. And like I said, it's kind of a walkthrough, and it came out of a conversation with Alan. We were sitting there in the gallery at an Eardley event, and it was a bit like, well, how long do I have to write this? Oh, a couple of weeks. Okay, I'll give it a go. But I knew I travelled in Africa, although East Africa rather than West, and I knew I was interested, and I knew it was something that was lacking, that it sort of hadn't really quite got into the other book, only very briefly mentioned. Also, these little figures, we actually have some at home, which came to us because my father-in-law worked at one point in Nigeria, so he'd bring home for the kids these little figures. So they're of a particular personal importance to me, I suppose.
Stewart, yeah. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of choosing the objects, I mean, I guess, like Gerrie, I've been to the Hunterian many times, millions of times, not millions of times. I've been to the Hunterian a lot. I feel like I know the collections that are on public display and have been the well-known ones quite well. But for this, I just sort of had a route around in the digital archives. I mean, an interesting one about where do you stop when you're digitizing, where do you need to be in front of something. But and when I was doing ekphrastic stuff, I used to feel quite important that I actually see the object in person. And a terrifyingly nearly a decade ago in my first pamphlet, I had a few poems about some paintings by the Netherlandish painter Jan van Eyck, and for those ones I felt that it was very important I actually go and see them all. But for this, I've kind of relaxed about that. I suppose different poets will feel differently, so I just had a route around in the online search function of the Hunterian website and stumbled upon the most random things that I could find, really.
I should say maybe what I've done with the previous anthologies, I did again with this one, which was to wait until the poems came in from the poets I invited to contribute, and then ask myself and the Hunterian curators, are there areas or particular things that have not been addressed or that maybe ought to be because they're important and are perhaps a bit neglected. There was one, I think the last one, about the museum, where there's a great collection of coins in the Hunterian, and so I brought them into a poem, and I also wanted to bring in the chair by which original examinations were conducted. So you sat in the chair, and nothing written, just tell us the fruits of your research in 20 minutes, and see whether you pass or fail. We'll see what you've learned. And then in the paintings one, there's a great painting by J.D. Ferguson of dancers naked dancing in a forest, which is usually associated with France, but no, this is Scotland on a sunny day. So it's called Les Yeux. The dancer, the happy ones, the healthy ones, actually, is what it signifies. Healthy, Scotland healthy. So I used those poems, those paintings, those objects as prompts for poems in those ones. And with this anthology, one of the things was the insect collection that Gerrie mentioned. There's a great collection of insects, and I was thinking about the forest, the trees, this painting, and another one about the forest floor, the Caledonian forest. What's there? You see the trees, and the threat to the climate, the culture of the natural environment, the threat from corporate investment in land, and Sitka spruce being planted, particularly in Langham and Dumfriesshire at the moment. All of these business arrangements that are, the idea that death is so much better for business than life. Well, what's the life actually all about? So I wrote a poem about the insects and the bees and moths and the smallest ant in the world. The smallest ant in the world is there in the Hunterian collection. So all these things are kind of opening the curiosity of it, the inquiry of it, and that was the principle I hope that it delivers. So I think I'd better say thank you, and I've got to go and give a lecture very shortly. So I want to say thanks to Gerrie, thanks to Stewart, and thanks to Eleni for organising this, and hand you back to Eleni to sum up.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you all enjoyed it. I very much did. And as I mentioned earlier, Hunter's Voices is available to purchase online by Stewed Rhubarb Press. And I'll share around the link to that to the participants today, and also when this recording goes up online on our YouTube channel. So thank you again, Alan. Thank you, Gerrie and Stewart, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Yeah, I should say that any questions that are there in the chat that we haven't answered yet, we'll get a chance to have a conversation. There'll be other events related to this book in the future, so we'll pick up on all of these inquiries. The inquiry doesn't end. Thank you.